I think at the moment in Kenya, we have about 22 million individuals accessing the internet. And what that would tell us is that more people are now aware and they're able to really delve into the Web 2, which is communicating with each other, rather than the previous Web 1, which would be now 10 years behind, which was just one way.
So how can data help organizations to align their messaging with the target audience?
Yeah. So if you see right now, there's a segmentation of the public and the social media users and the internet users. We have examples of TikTok and how you will find very many demographics. You have the Luo talk, Kamba talk, Kikuyu talk, and those are very specific demographics that brand can speak to. I would say at Nendo we have 3 categories of crisis. There's a colleague crisis, there is a company crisis, and there's a customer crisis, which is the biggest.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ann Kuria, and welcome to Influence 21 podcast. Today, we are delving into the world of data-driven strategies for communication. And the world is moving at an amazing speed. We have very informed audiences. We are talking of a changing PR landscape where now audiences know what they want, and they want to be addressed in a relevant, timely, and timely way, and they expect personalized messages, giving them what they need. On our podcast today, we have none other than Francis Gikaru, all the way from Nendo. Francis, you could introduce yourself a little bit and tell us more about Nendo and what you do at Nendo.
Thank you. My name is Francis. I am a data scientist at Nendo. And at Nendo, we aim to delivering grounded African insights to the current African market and to the world across, just making sure that decisions they make are very well informed and will land effectively to the people and the audiences.
Okay, I know you've been doing this for a while. Maybe you can tell us how is this different? 10 years ago, now that the role of data was not as amplified as it is, and throw in the introduction of AI into the picture that helps us kind of analyze our audiences more clearly and get to know the sentiment and get to know what they expect to hear from us. How would you say, how has this changed? Is it any different than 10 years ago? Is the audience more informed? Is the audience more, does the audience have a bit of more preferences, and how do they want us to communicate with them?
So I would say, looking 10 years back, one of the big things that has changed is the access to the internet. I think at the moment in Kenya, we have about 22 million individuals accessing the internet. And what that would tell us is that more people are now aware and they're able to really delve into the Web 2, which is communicating with each other, rather than the previous Web 1, which would be now 10 years behind, which was just one way. So at the moment, we have two-way communication with the internet. And at the moment, we can say we have around 60 million subscribers of mobile in Kenya. That includes dual SIMing because the population is 54 there. So more people have access to data right now, so they know more, especially with the openness of social media. People can see reviews of products from abroad. They can see reviews of maybe policies from abroad, and they can be able to make same decisions right here in the local market. So I would say we now have a very informed and educated demographic than we had 10 years ago. And what brands maybe should be doing right now is getting to understand what are these people looking for above and beyond what the brands are telling them directly. Yeah.
Those numbers are amazing. We are talking of 60 million internet access, 60 million with access to mobile phones. And I believe that means that also the information overload is there. The 24-hour, 24/7 news economy, whereby there's basically a lot of information. So the question is, how do you stand out amid all this information? How do you stand out as a brand so that you're not noise because the information is too much? And that brings me to my next question. So how can data help organizations to align their messaging with the target audience?
Yeah. So if you see right now, there's a segmentation of the public and the social media users and the internet users. We have examples of TikTok and how you will find very many demographics. You have the Luo talk, Kamba talk, Kikuyu talk, and those are very specific demographics that brand can speak to. I would say recording and listening to the voices of the individuals, because now at Web 2 we have now people can talk back to the brands, so using their inboxes and the comment sections, and also the reach of their posts is a very good way of them being able to see and understand and listen to what the people are saying. So those are very many channels. We could explore even more channels when it comes to social listening, where you can be able to see what other people are talking about your brand without even necessarily them tagging you. Yeah. So the question of brands measuring and listening to individuals is key, because there are very many channels for them to listen.
Okay, so it's good that you've highlighted that what data is giving our brands an opportunity to actually get to measure and get to know what their clients want by simply looking at the engagement, looking at the sentiment, looking at the reach and what these people are telling them. And I like the fact that you're challenging brands to just listen to that, to be able to tailor make how to speak to them and which channels to use to speak to them. So my next question is, what key metrics can organizations use to track the effectiveness of communication campaign?
Yeah. So an effective campaign ideally should be measured with output. I think we all know we can't argue with results, right? So one of the key things that brands tend to fall off of is just listening to data and not having now insights derived from that data. We have maybe 5 million individuals speaking to a brand. The brand can choose to look at 50 million in numbers, or they can decide to actually listen to the key insights and the key messages that are coming from those communications. So that's where we differentiate the levels of knowledge. The lowest one being data, numbers, and something you might not make sense of, and then information, and then wisdom, and then insights. So brands are very much encouraged to have listened to insights. It is a top tier. You can never go wrong with it, because for data, you can always go wrong with data. I mean, we've seen a lot of misinformation, but there's a lot of data in it, right? But we cannot follow misinformation because it's not what is actually being used out there, right? So one of the key things is brands moving from just looking at data and now analyzing the specific insight that is coming from what people are telling them. Yeah.
That's quite insightful. I'm sure so many people don't know there's a difference between data and insight. In fact, a lot of people think it's the same thing. But from what you have done from your analysis, it's you say that there's data, there's knowledge, and there's wisdom, and there's insights. And you say that the lowest form is actually data. I think data is what you find everywhere, the numbers, and you are kind of advising us to listen more to the insights. And that's a good fact, because I hope after today the audience knows that there's actually a difference between data. Data is the overall, the general, if I'm getting it right. And now there's the specific insights, and that's what you're recommending that the brands should listen to. So our next question is, how can organizations use data to understand and influence public opinion?
So when it comes to public opinion, one of the biggest things about public opinion is listening. Most people actually uh, just want to rant, right? They might not want a solution, and I know some of us have that, but they just want to have that sense of being listened to. So public opinions can come through majorly social media, because that's the most raw source of public insights and public communications. People come from talking to one another to talking to um, brands and public figures. And that is a huge playground because you will be able to get now the raw sentiments from individuals. I would say here at Nendo we use what we call social listening, whereby we use tools just to shed light on what the public is saying. It could be using the craziest keywords they have nowadays of political leaders, brands, and products. And it goes beyond now people who have tagged brands, and goes beyond to people who are now talking to each other in comment sections, in posts about certain brands. So being in the public and brands talking to the public, the biggest way they can get insights and communicate to the public is by using social media, and not segregating them into batches, but just having a wide open net, casting the net, and now analyzing from that net. Out of that net, you'll find sentiments, emotions, tone of voice that will tell you what are people really feeling about certain products, certain policies, and the like. Yeah.
Okay, I like the fact that you have highlighted the importance of social listening skills. And I think this is key because as we try to understand our audience, we want to understand their behavior. We want to understand what they're asking from us. And I think one of the ways we can do that is just checking from the engagement and also the sentiments around those engagement and how they feel about our brands. What are the challenges and opportunities in measuring public sentiments?
So the biggest challenge when it comes to public sentiments is one, misinformation. I think one of the biggest things we've seen over time at Nendo is there are people who will use a certain topic
Mhm.
just to clout chase and not have any result out of it. Just to pump numbers. Maybe at the moment we have X paying influencers or people who have high engagement. So some people will run to that and blow up maybe certain pieces of content. So that includes misinformation. Now, one of the biggest challenge is one, removing misinformation from the data. At Nendo, we have steps of approaches of removing noise from the data, especially when it comes to social listening. And also there's a huge need for getting now the data away from people we call trend jackers, people who just come to mention your brand and then continue selling their products. You can have a brand being mentioned by an individual, but they're selling leather shoes, and that pumps their numbers to a way that is not real, right? So if they listen to that data, which is public, they might be skewed to believe that they're doing good. But it's just someone who jacked their keywords, jacked their trends, jacked their names and brand names, and went south. So that is the biggest challenge when it comes to public data. One of the biggest opportunities is also that it is a huge gold mine for raw insights. Nobody will come to give you a survey and you answer it truthfully, because you might answer it just so that you can get favor from the person who is interviewing you, right? But when you go to social media, everyone will speak as much as they want to, which is a big opportunity, because now you'll be able to classify individuals by patterns and trends. And there you'll be able to see the pain points of individuals, maybe the public and the market, on what the market wants. Yeah. So those are the challenges and opportunities. Yeah.
Okay, so you've had it for yourself that some of the biggest challenges is misinformation and trend jackers, you called it. I think I've seen that a lot on Twitter. There's a trend and someone is selling shoes, someone is selling furniture, they jump on it and then they proceed. So you might think you're trending and you're achieving your campaign goals, but in real sense, you're not. And that's where now Nendo and Newmark come in to help you sieve the data and to help you remove the misinformation and the trend jackers and remain with the sifted data that you need. The next question is how can data help organizations build trust and credibility with stakeholders?
So organizations can use data. One, the only way to build trust with the public is by showing them that you listen. So creating more avenues of them reaching out to you. So an example is previously we had the Gen Z protest, and one of the things that we saw even in the development of civic tech, which is technology developed specifically for the public to voice their opinions. We saw chatbots, we saw GPTs that would break down what the at that time finance bill was, and what they would get as repercussions, and also channels of individuals now giving opinions of why they feel that it is not the right thing. So building public trust is creating more avenues of them seeing that you are willing to listen. So establishing more, right now technology has given us an avenue of recording more data, even using decentralized networks without getting an overload. Recently we saw one of our public offices getting an overload of emails, but using decentralized networks, we can get over that. So having more channels of listening, and also establishing very sane messaging that is not self-centered. One of the things that I know the public might not sit well with is messaging that is self-centered. I was at this conference doing this and that, and I got this and that. They would prefer more of what it meant for them, the public. So one of the key ways of establishing public trust is getting avenues of listening, having more people talk to you, and also creating content that seems more customer and public centric. Yeah.
Okay, that's a nice summary. He talks about how we can create a public trust.
Yeah.
And you've highlighted 3 things which I agree with. You've talked about listening more. You've talked about providing more platforms where our audience can come and engage with us. And you've talked about being authentic in the content that we send out there. And you have also advised against being self-centered. I see this a lot with government officials. I planted a tree. I went to church. So I think we can learn a lot from that. And I want us to talk about crisis communication and the role of data in crisis communication. I know in the PR landscape right now, we are finding that crisis is a bit, it's easier for crisis to happen right now than it was in the past because, again, the media landscape at that point didn't have the digital. So a crisis could happen today and we'll get to learn about it tomorrow. But now we are talking of a crisis happening and we are aware it could happen in New York right now.
Yeah.
But already in Africa, we know. So my first question would be about crisis communication, and the role of data would be how can data help organizations identify and respond to crisis more effectively? Yeah.
Yeah. So at I would say at the end we have 3 categories of crisis. There's a colleague crisis, there is a company crisis, and there's a customer crisis, which is the biggest, right? So a colleague crisis could be maybe an individual posted a post that was not approved, brought very much chaos, a lot of chaos to the brand, and that can be dealt with as a colleague crisis. So that means ensuring better systems of maybe approvals, and making sure that when individuals in the brands are talking out to the public, they have set guidelines that make sure that even if there's a crisis, it won't emanate from a name. I think we've seen from telco brands recently, just the faces of the companies getting lashed at just because of maybe appearing in certain events or posting certain posts. So having guidelines, and that is one of the things we train people at, having effective communication guidelines when engaging with the social media public, making sure that your company faces, that would be CEOs, CFOs, they don't end up in the mud when it comes to social media.
Yeah.
The second one is crisis in the companies. Some time back we had a training, and we saw that about 70% of corporates here in Kenya in the banking industry have not done a fire drill, and it's part of their safety policy, right? So that is a crisis that could emanate just from not following one small guideline or something of the sort. So the biggest way of addressing a company crisis is just having guidelines specific to follow when it comes to how those companies get into their daily work. And the last one, crisis of a customer. People tend to speak to the brand when they have a problem. For example, you will go to Twitter and talk to an electric brand or a telco brand privately. You'll DM them and say, I have this problem with my SIM card. I have this problem with my network. If that doesn't work, you end up, or people end up going to now the public. They now don't want a solution. They want to rant.
Yeah.
This brand, I have been texting it or calling or emailing for a while. They have not been responding. And out of that, you see loads and loads of responses of people agreeing to that. So that is a public crisis that comes from not addressing the private messages and the like. How the customers come to you first matters the most, because there is the first place you'll prevent a crisis from happening. Respond to the client to the way that they'll be satisfied, and then the rest can happen. One of the biggest ways we've found in addressing crises is being able to collect data on time. For example, every day we collect data from some of our clients in the banking industry, and every day we have to show them if there's a minute-by-minute crisis arising. Maybe they have had negative mentions rise maybe by 5%. That alert is sent to them to their SMSs or email platforms. So they're able now to follow the conversation as it happens, or the crisis as it happens, and they're able to craft better response. That might be a letter to the public, or just a response to the individual who has a pain point, and that can really dim down the crisis. So that is the way to address a crisis through the three categories: the customer, the company, and the colleague, and also having a live way of monitoring that data so that you can be ahead of the crisis.
Okay, I've learned quite a few things, and maybe just I need to reiterate on a few points. You have said that when it comes to crisis and leveraging data, said it's important to have a crisis communication plan. You've said it's also important to identify loopholes depending on your industry, identify the things that could lead to a crisis. And number 3, you have mentioned proactivity by saying that we need to listen more. You say that this audience, our customers, they usually come to our inboxes first looking for a solution. Maybe they want you to help them, and then because you're taking too long, you're not engaging, now they come out and start ranting online. I've also heard you mention the importance of having a crisis communication training and identifying the right people who are supposed to engage when the crisis happens. I would also add on the framework, having a crisis communication framework. So the last question on crisis, if I may just go into that one, is how can organizations use data to mitigate the impact of crisis on their reputation?
So when it comes to crisis, this is a question of the crisis has happened, and how do brands now use the various data points they have to now bring it back. I think one of the main things we've seen is having a very wide range of data points. Most people will only look at one channel. Maybe they're looking at the SMSs that they're receiving. But when you broaden it up to social media, to calls, to emails, to the tone of voice of how people are talking towards one another about your brand, it will help the brand to kind of bring together a better and well understood response to that. So having being able to get a better understanding through those many channels, and getting them to now craft a better way to respond. We see even from our previous crisis days, some brands are baited into speaking about the crisis. For example, you'll find a person on Twitter will say, I hate brands so and so because it has not been working for me. It has maybe insulted me in some way. And then very many people will come at the comment section to try and reply. One of the individuals happens to be a customer of a competitor. So they mention, oh, my brand doesn't do this to me. It's actually the best brand. So unfortunately, the competitor brand gets baited into adding to that conversation. It could be a conversation of misinformation, and they get hooked into that conversation, and it adds up to more misinformation. Because, for example, a gold verified account commenting on our posts will give it more credibility, right? So one of the big ways is to have more channels to listen, and also be keen to see what are the actual complaints about, so that you don't get baited into a crisis and you are part of another huge crisis that is now corporate facing. Yeah.
So you've had it for yourself when it comes to online crisis. Listen more to your audience, be proactive, engage as early as you could to try and sort out the problem before it gets out of hand. And there's another matter that is very close to my heart about ethical and transparent communication. I think of late we are seeing a lot of brands being accused of giving their data, I don't know, to the government or to third party entities. We are seeing a lot of even legal cases in Kenya. Recently, we saw someone take, I will mention the brand, Truecaller to court because they say there was a breach of Kenyans' data. And this brings me to, I'm sure that even you as you use your gadget, sometimes you're thinking of, let's say I'm thinking of some lotion.
Yeah.
And the next thing when I go to Facebook, Instagram, or even TikTok, I start seeing lotion adverts. I don't know what miracles these are, but now because you're here, maybe you'll help us dive into what is happening. So how can organizations ensure that their use of data is ethical and transparent?
Yeah. So the unfortunate thing is, one, the highest bidder is the one that has the largest voice. So companies can decide, and we've seen this struggle at Nendo with some of the brands. They really want to listen to the data and the insights. However, that data and insights is against now their industry leaders. So it's against their opinions or what they stand for. So they end up going with the opinion of the leader rather than the data. And that brews more unethical problems and lack of trust by individuals.
Yeah.
I would say, one, establishing the willingness to listen to the data is the biggest thing when it comes to ethical use of data. If the individual has the most power and the most influence, they should also be willing to be the most humble when it comes to advice, when it comes to when data comes to advise them. So having individuals listen to the data and the insights out of the data, and using that now to establish communication or engage in the public domain. If we look at how privacy has become nowadays, I think it's a pain point to every brand and every individual as well, because now you'd find, for example, what you've said, the brands are listening to you through social media platforms. They feed you the content that you are thinking about or talking about. Maybe you are in public transport and the radio was speaking about baby products. You have no idea why you have baby products on your feed.
On my YouTube.
I think one of the key things when it comes to ethics, it also starts with you and the habits you have when it comes to protecting yourself against some of these items. Some brands have maybe VPNs. You can buy premium accounts to block you away from everyone identifying you on Truecaller. You have blocking status on the various social media platforms. So when all the individuals are protected, the lack of ethics of brands and other individuals might not affect the individuals to some certain extent. We can come down to even password managers, and how people will be willing to now walk away from the breach from the brands and have it that they are secure by themselves. So ethics when it comes to brands it's a very thin line. Industry leaders have to do what they have to do to turn up profits, but at the same time they have to do something that is ethical so that they listen to the data. However, if everyone else makes it a character to protect their sensitive places, it will be much better.
Okay, so you've had ethical data management is a role that we all have to play. All the stakeholders have to be involved, including the government, the different brands, and even as individuals. Um, what are the potential risk of misusing data in communication? For example, I would give a very perfect example. So we have come to you, maybe you are a hospital, or not even that. I'll use a very simple example. There are these books you find in buildings for security purposes. So you find before you enter KICC, there's a book there that you have to write your name, your ID number, your phone number. Somehow, sometimes I think these books are usually sold to people because I believe that at that particular simple point, that data is usually sold to someone. Same to maybe you're going to an entity where you have to leave your details, and before you know, you start receiving marketing SMSs from a brand that is in that building. So it tells you that the data you left at the gate was definitely given to someone in that organization. And that's why I was asking you that question. What can you say about that?
So one of the trainings that we do at Nendo is about data hygiene. You would find there are some places you might not be able to protect yourself facing the public. For example, there's a building you have to leave your ID. There's a building you have to leave your contact details and the like. However, there are systems and softwares you can use and also habits that you can develop. For example, I know if everyone does a test right now, you'd find you have a subscription you never
Exactly,
subscribed to.
like 10.
Yeah. So maybe having a data clean every once in maybe 2 months.
Yeah.
Getting rid of maybe some subscriptions. One of my friends had a very weird phone tone that dials when you call them, and I had never expected it from them. So I asked them what happened, and they had no idea they had been subscribed to a tune at the start of their phone, and it happened in the night.
Is it those ringtones that when you call funny songs comes? Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah. So you can imagine all the clients that they deal with calling her now, and it becomes chaotic.
Yeah.
But having that data hygiene where you check your passwords regularly, Microsoft recommends every month you make sure you've at least changed your password, but don't write it on a sticky note and leave it in the office. There are password managers that we have, and also hygiene to make sure that you don't leave 100% of your data everywhere. There are places where you can be crafty and wise, not to leave your usable fonts or usable contacts or identifiable contacts. That is more recommended, where you'll find some of these individuals and institutes don't really use it. The person who is demanding that information is the person who uses it. And some of the telco brands we have right now have come up with better ways of protecting individuals from that, especially when it came to SIM swapping. We would find an individual is being bugged completely, so they end up switching off their phone, and when the phone is off, it's switched. So everything they had is completely taken away. But now at least we have more measures, almost to biometric measures, to make sure that the person has given consent to the change of this data or the sharing of this data. Yeah. So I think it's a more personal thing, to create more blockers. I think on my personal computer, I rarely see ads because I have closed out ads from my personal computer. You can do the same with your phones. You can do the same with your networks, and also securing the very basic safeguards that are provided by platforms just to secure yourself and the data that you have. Yeah.
Okay. Before we come to the parting shot, I think my last question would be on the trends to expect in these data-driven strategies in the whole data aspect. What are the new trends? What should we expect in future?
Yeah. So for Kenya, I would say we have a very short and sweet way of describing how data is being used by Kenya. And we did this with our prediction in 2019, where the first is search. So people, everyone has an Android phone. Rather, 90% of Kenyans have an Android phone.
Are you saying that we don't buy iPhones and the rest?
Yeah, no, not really. The first application you'll have by default is Google search. That's why search will be the biggest form of trend while using data and media technology. The second one is sports and betting. The Premier League will always have the top 10 seat when it comes to websites and applications downloaded in Kenya. Everyone in every season of, like, for example, 2024, January to now, the top 3 betting companies in Kenya are in the top 10 web searches. They're in the top 2 application downloads in Kenya. So you can see sports betting is also a key way people are using their data and technology in Kenya. The next one is streaming, illegal streaming, streaming that is unethical and the like.
Yeah.
That is also one way, because people are trying to limit the megabytes that they're using and the cost of streaming. I've seen platforms try and give free accounts to Kenyans. They're not HD, but they're free for them to use because they understand now the competition they're having against the people's bundles. So illegal streaming has become a big thing and might continue on. We see more applications coming up, more websites coming up just to get a free peek on streaming and entertainment. The next one is stories, and where people now use YouTube, Instagram, and the like, just to give out their stories and what they are telling the public. So those are the ways that individual will be since 2019 have been using the internet and might be using for the next 5 years. Yeah.
Parting shots.
I think most of the communication and data-driven approaches we endeavor to have starts from the very basic things. So individuals can have the best systems at a personal level, and they'll translate to the larger and public-facing levels. So data efficiency starts with the individual. Data ethics starts with the individual, and also data sanity when it comes to now being right and truthful without being noiseful and misinforming also starts with the individual, so that you will not be now forwarding as it came. Yeah. So that is my parting shot. Yeah.
Okay. I think this has been really nice and educative and very informative. In the whole the few minutes that we have had, we've been able to discuss about the role of data-driven insights. We've been able to understand the difference between data and insights. We have been able to understand that for us to be able to target our audiences and to get them where we are, we need to know how to use data to help us fragment them, segment the audience, know the channels where we can get them, and know how to engage them. We have also talked about the role of crisis communication and the role of data. And Francis mentioned the role of the importance of having a crisis communication plan, the importance of listening and being proactive so as to avoid the crisis happening, just listening to social sentiments and social listening skills. And we have also discussed understanding public opinion, and he mentioned the importance of listening and giving our audiences more platforms for them to engage with us. He also talked about authenticity in the messaging that we send out to our audiences when it comes to shaping public opinion. And lastly, we have talked about ethical and transparent communication, and he has laid it out very well about the proper way to use data for organizations. We have talked about organizations that are using data that they get without thinking about the legal consequences, especially for marketing and communication purposes. And he has advised against that. And he has also advised against having a framework on how to use this data that we receive ethically. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and it's been a pleasure to host you, Francis. I actually hope that we can have a part 2 of this. We'll be coming back to, because it feels like there's so much to learn about data. Now that the world is moving forward, we can't see a world without data anymore. We can't see a world without insights. And for us to understand our clients and their brands and what they stand for and what they want to communicate to their audience, I think data is key for us. So I think this is the first engagement we're having with Nendo, and we're likely to have another just to help our audiences understand what it is that we do and how we can help them target their audiences and how we can help them create the right messaging for their audience. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you.